Title: 50 Years Lost to a Stepfather's Jealousy. A story of family, lies, and regret. When I was just 5 years old, my mother was coerced into making a decision that would alter the course of my entire life. She was forced by my stepfather to sever all ties with my father's side of the family. It wasn't just a casual choice, it was a demand. A demand from a man whose jealousy and insecurities were so consuming that he couldn't stand the idea of my mother having a past, one that involved a family he was never a part of. I grew up believing the lie that my father didn't want to have anything to do with me. The narrative I was fed, year after year, was that he had walked away, had abandoned me. I was told that he didn't care, that he didn't love me, and that he never even thought about me. According to my stepfather, my father wanted nothing more than to forget he ever had a daughter. It was the justification I was given, the excuse for why my dad wasn't in my life, why I never saw him, why I never knew my grandparents, my aunts, uncles, or even my half-brother. For 50 years, I lived under this crushing weight of abandonment. I mourned the loss of a father I barely knew, believing that he had chosen to forget about me. I grew up without the guidance, the support, and the love that comes from a strong family. My grandparents, who I later learned adored me, never had the chance to be a part of my life. My aunts and uncles, those people who could have been a bridge to the past, to my roots, were cut out, left in the dark about me, just as I was left in the dark about them. The gap between us was vast, and I didn't even know it existed. And my half-brother, an entire sibling I never knew I had, was kept from me. I lost a brother, someone I could have grown up with, shared memories with, and supported through life. But none of that ever happened. He too was locked away in the box of forgotten family, all because my stepfather couldn't stand the idea of my mother's history, the family she had before him. But then something unexpected happened. After all these years of believing my father's absence was a deliberate choice, a revelation came to light. At 56, I finally discovered the truth. My father, despite all of his flaws, despite the mistakes he made as a husband, never wanted to forget me. In fact, he had fought for years to be a part of my life, to be a father to me. His absence wasn't a result of neglect or indifference. It was because he was kept away, isolated by a jealous, small-minded man who could not stomach the thought of my mother's past relationships. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. I had spent 5 decades under the false impression that my father didn't care, that he had chosen a life without me. But all along, it wasn't him who made that choice. It was my stepfather. His jealousy, his deep insecurity about a past he could never be part of, was the force that kept me from my father and my family. I can never get those lost years back. I will never be able to know the grandparents who have passed, the aunts and uncles who could have shaped my life, or the brother I never had the chance to grow up with. 50 years of my life were stolen from me. Not because of anything I did, but because of the actions of a man who wanted to erase my father's existence from my life. All because he couldn't bear the idea of my mother having a history before him. It's heartbreaking to know that all that time, all those years, could have been different. My dad could have been a part of my life. My family could have been a part of my life. But instead, I grew up in the shadows of someone else's insecurity and bitterness. And now, all I can do is grieve for the family I never knew, for the relationships that were denied to me, and for the love I lost, simply because of a man too small to see the value in family. Update: the journey continues, a bittersweet discovery. I wanted to give everyone an update since I shared my story about losing 50 years of my life due to my stepfather's jealousy and the family I never knew. Your messages have been overwhelming. So many of you have shared your own stories, offered advice, and just listened. It's been a comfort, honestly, to know that I'm not alone in this kind of pain and confusion. So, here's where I am now. After the shocking revelation about my father's desire to be a part of my life all along, I've started to piece together the fragments of a past that I didn't even know existed. There's a lot of grief, a lot of anger, but also a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, some kind of healing can happen. Even now, after all these years. I was able to track down some of my father's relatives, though it hasn't been easy. My dad's side was scattered. Some have passed, but a few of them are still out there. It's surreal, honestly. I've spoken to my aunt, my father's sister, and I can barely describe the flood of emotions I felt when I first heard her voice. She's been waiting for this moment for years, just like I have. There's a sense of relief, almost like two strangers realizing they're not strangers after all. They were just kept apart by a lie. The hardest part, though, is the grief. I'm mourning the family I could have had. My grandparents, who passed away long before I even knew they existed. They could have been the anchors I needed when I was younger. My aunts and uncles, who could have been a second set of parents, a source of wisdom and love. And my half-brother, the brother I never knew. I've learned a little about him, but it's still too raw. The fact that we were both kept apart for so long, it's almost unbearable. But despite the pain, I'm also trying to make up for lost time. My aunt and I have spoken a lot in the past few weeks. We're still working on rebuilding a connection. It's slow. There's a lot of catching up to do. And even though my father isn't here to tell me his side of things, he passed a few years ago, my aunt is filling in the gaps, telling me stories about him that are both heartwarming and heartbreaking. One thing that's been a bit unexpected is the mixed feelings I've had about my mother. She's been supportive, but it's also clear she has her own guilt and regrets. I don't blame her. She was put in a horrible position by my stepfather. But it's hard to reconcile that the woman I've known as my mother also played a part in keeping me away from a whole side of my family. We've had some tough conversations, and while we're trying to move forward, it's not easy. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. As for my stepfather, I'm not sure how to approach that part of my past yet. I haven't spoken to him in years, and I'm still processing the anger I feel. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand why he did what he did, but part of me is starting to realize that I don't need to. I can't change the past, no matter how much I wish I could. I'm also still grieving the time I lost with my dad. The man who could have been there for me, who could have been a role model and a friend. I never got to hear his side, never got to see him as anything other than the absent figure in my life. That's something I have to live with, and while I'm learning to accept it, it doesn't make it any easier. So for now, I'm taking things one step at a time. There's a lot of healing to do, but there's also hope. I've gained new family, even if it's bittersweet, and I'm doing my best to make the most of the time I have left with them. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm not giving up on it yet. Thank you to everyone who has been so supportive and understanding. I'll keep updating as I continue on this journey of rediscovery and healing. I just wanted to let you all know that, while this is a hard road, I'm finding strength in the connections I'm starting to build. More updates to come, but for now, thank you all. Final update, a journey of healing and closure. I can hardly believe I'm writing this final update, but here I am, reflecting on a journey that has spanned decades, one filled with pain, discovery, healing, and ultimately, closure. To start, I want to express my deepest gratitude to everyone who has reached out, shared their stories, or just offered a listening ear. Your support has meant more than I can put into words. It has been a lifeline in a time when I felt like I was drowning in confusion and regret. I've come a long way since I first posted about losing 50 years of my life to lies and a stepfather's jealousy. There's been a lot of pain, but there's also been healing, sometimes in unexpected ways. I've continued to rebuild connections with my father's side of the family. My aunt and I have become very close. She shared stories about my father that I never would have imagined. He wasn't perfect, far from it. But hearing about him through her has allowed me to see him not just as the absentee father, but as a person, with his own struggles, hopes, and dreams. It's been a humbling experience, and while it doesn't erase the hurt, it has allowed me to understand him better. I've also connected with my half-brother. The first time we spoke, it felt like meeting a stranger, but it didn't take long for us to bond. There's still a lot of distance between us. We're both working through the weight of lost time, but there's also a sense of peace now that we know each other. It's not the kind of relationship I thought we'd have when we were kids, but it's something, and that's enough for me. My mother and I have had some tough but important conversations. She has expressed regret for what happened, and while I know she did what she thought was best at the time, it's been hard to reconcile the mother I thought I knew with the one who played a part in keeping me from my family. That said, we've been working on rebuilding our relationship. It's not perfect, and it may never be, but there's a new understanding between us now, one that I hope will grow stronger with time. As for my stepfather, I don't think I'll ever fully understand the depth of his insecurities and jealousy, but I've reached a point where I don't need to. I've learned that, for my own peace, I need to let go of the anger and resentment I've carried all these years. I'm still processing, but I no longer feel consumed by the need for answers or revenge. His actions were out of my control, and the damage they caused is something I have to accept, not for his sake, but for my own. In the end, I can't change the past, and that's a truth I've had to come to terms with. I've lost so much: my father, my grandparents, those early years with my extended family, but I've also gained so much. I've found new relationships, rediscovered lost parts of myself, and been reminded of the importance of family, no matter how fractured it may be. My journey may not have gone the way I hoped, but it has brought me to a place of peace I never thought possible. So, this is where I end my update. I'm no longer searching for answers or for the family I lost. I've found the strength to move forward with what I have now, and I'm learning to embrace the family that remains, in all its imperfect beauty. Thank you again to everyone who has supported me throughout this. Your words of encouragement have been a guiding light. While this chapter is closing, I feel like the next one is just beginning. Wishing you all peace, healing, and the courage to seek the connections that matter most in your own lives.